All right, are we ready to go? Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Representative Rachel Keshel from Legislative District 17, and I represent voters from Pima and Pinal counties. Constituents in both of these counties, just like Maricopa County, have dangerous levels of distrust in our current system of elections. In fact, polls show that as many as 2/3 of Americans don't trust that our elections are being run fairly. I have always been and will always be about solutions. The single biggest conduit for corrupting elections worldwide is mail-in voting. This is proven by the research of Dr. John Lott, who shows roughly 3/4 of European countries explicitly ban the practice, as do Russia, Japan, Mexico, and Israel. A bipartisan panel, including former President Jimmy Carter, formed 2 decades ago, also warned of the dangers of mail-in elections. Our beautiful state, which has elections that would embarrass residents of even warlord-run countries, sees 3/4 of its ballots come through the mail. Even more troubling is that 3/4 of the vote comes from two counties, known to have constant issues administering elections. The glut of late early ballots has led to Arizona taking up to 2 weeks to finalize results dating back to 2018. Interestingly, when voting centers were first fully used here. Florida, 3 times our size, but with much better safeguards on mail-in ballots, manages to have almost the entire vote tallied within hours of polls closing on election night. We will likely have to wait for Andy Biggs to assume the governorship next year to have meaningful legislation like Florida's that limits the damage caused by so much mail-in voting. However, the perceived needs for mail-in balloting stems from our massive precincts being too large to effectively run in-person voting within a narrow time frame. For example, dozens of precincts in Arizona have more than 5,000 voters in a single precinct. This is not found only in Maricopa or Pima counties, but also in smaller counties such as Navajo and Mojave. You'd have to be living in a cave to have missed the ongoing public spat between the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors and duly elected County Recorder Justin Heap, who is my former Arizona Freedom Caucus colleague in the House of Representatives, and as honorable of a man who has served in that chamber. 985,000 Maricopa County voters gave him a mandate 15 months ago to restore order to a county that was not only at the epicenter of the 2020 election and its many problems, resulting in the first Republican presidential loss of the county since 1948, despite a record increase in Republican votes from one cycle to the next, but the most focal county in America for the 2020 election, when 3 out of every 5 tabulators went down at almost exclusively Republican-dominated voting centers, resulting in 4-hour-long voting lines all over the map. That county's supervisors now have the audacity to threaten his removal, when in fact, before Heap took office, most involved with the county's elections couldn't be trusted to clean toilets, let alone safeguard the sacred right of more than 2 million people to a free and fair vote. I ran for office starting 5 years ago to transfer power back to the people. This fall, if passed through the House and Senate, HCR 2016 will bring sanity back to our elections by giving voters the choice to return to smaller precincts capped at 2,500 registered voters. Moving back to manageable precinct sizes will not only make elections smoother, but reduce reliance upon mail-in balloting. It will also help return voting to what it was supposed to be, a tradition of engaged citizenship rather than a passive, weeks-long game of ballot collecting. I grew up in Colorado, voting at a local school or church, and I knew the results when I went to bed. Now, thanks to the actions of left-wing radicals who have taken over my former state, elections are conducted by mail, which takes days to count. Ironically, in 2016, the BBC wrote that prolonged ballot counting is one of the biggest indicators of fraud in developing countries. It would be nice for a change to see that level of concern here in our beautiful state of Arizona. Had Pennsylvania and Georgia backed Kamala Harris instead of President Trump, America would have been waiting for over a week for Arizona to determine the winner of the presidency. How embarrassing and dangerous that would have been. My HCR 2016, which I am very proud to sponsor, casts aside unviable solutions and puts us back on a path to acceptable elections once again. Thank you very much. And I will take questions now.
What would you say to the people that can't make it to the polls and mail-in ballots are essential?
So I will tell you, in my personal opinion, I understand that that's where a lot of the fraud is occurring, is in our mail-in ballots. I do understand, however, that Arizona has a love affair with mail-in ballots. Over 80% of people vote that way here in Arizona. So there will still be an option within this bill to fill out your mail-in ballot at home and take it to a drop box wherever you may choose. So that doesn't cut out that availability to voters who want to choose to do that. In a perfect world, according to me, if we could completely get back to absentee ballots, where if you're overseas, disabled, those types of people, and you just cannot make it to the polls, then you can get your absentee ballot. But we have, in Arizona and America as a whole, we have basically given up our sacred right to vote, knowing that that vote is counting, that we have free and fair elections for convenience. And I think that's where we're in the predicament we are today. Yes.
Good afternoon. My question is twofold. One about the machines. We got stuck. Some of them are on them. We got stuck. We had to switch it all.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them were in Phoenix. Wisconsin, we had no problem. But in Phoenix and other areas, they did.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, are we taking any measures with the machine up and down?
So I will say, yes, there were obviously issues in 22 that we really noticed. It happened to be in really Republican areas. People said they saw their ballots being shoved into black trash bags. We don't know where those ballots went. And so one of the biggest things that causes is a mistrust, a distrust in our elections. And that's a huge problem. When you know that 2/3 of Americans on both sides of the aisle from all parties don't trust our elections, we need to take measures at the Arizona legislature to instill some trust back into our elections. I will say Representative Alex Colladin, standing here behind me, who I'm so proud to work with, he does have a measure that will go to the ballot that will take us to Florida-style voting. Those are the types of things we need to do, and whether that dies over in the Senate or we can get it through, it will be up to the people then to decide what they want to do with their elections, which to me is wonderful. Now, with the machines, there's a difference between e-poll books, tabulators, and all those types of things. We need to make sure that the machines are certified correctly. I know there were certain issues with the machines not being certified. That's according to state law, they need to be. And when you're putting the wrong size of ballot paper into the tabulators, which is supposedly what caused a lot of the malfunction in the 22 election here in Maricopa County, that's a huge problem that needs to be looked into as well.
One more question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The photo ID. Are we in Arizona? There was that photo that people only had left. So what happened? How did they add a
Well, so thank you for that question. It is state law already to have photo ID, but I will tell you right now, I don't believe it's happening when people are being registered potentially at the MVD, is I think where that's missing. And we have signature verification, but when we can't trust that the signature verification is happening properly, then, and that's our one check on mail-in ballots, that's an issue. And I will say about voter ID, that is a very popular issue across the board. Citizenship and voter ID, up to 90% of Americans agree that those two things should be in place in order to vote in our elections. During one of our election committees, Representative Colladin again asked 3 leftist lobbyists if they believed that you should be a U.S. citizen to vote in our elections, and they ran from an answer. They said the quiet part out loud by not answering. And so that was very telling where the other side stands with that. But constitutionally, you should be a citizen, and you should have to prove that to vote in our elections. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much for your time today.